What was your worst / weirdest experience at somebody else's house? When I was 6 or 7 I went over to my friend's house one afternoon after school to try out their new PlayStation. They had just come out around then and we weren't very well off, so it was a big deal. His older brother comes in, 16 or 17, takes the controller from me and sits down in front of me, blocking the TV. Not unusual, he was a prick. My buddy starts to yell at him, older brother's laughing, then his eyes roll back into his head and he falls back into my lap, convulsing and foaming at the mouth, having a seizure. I froze. I couldn't do anything. I just stared down at his face in my lap, watching him die, or so I thought. His mom runs and screaming and ushers us out while she calls 911. Obviously, I went home. My mom wouldn't let me go see my friend after that. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. Couple weeks later, they moved back to Cali. I did get to say goodbye to my buddy, but I never saw him again. Found out later from my mom, his brother had actually odd. Flash forward 20 years, and I'm in therapy and an addict. I had completely forgotten about it. We were talking about my triggers, and I brought up how, for some reason, every time I play video games, I want to use. It all came flooding back to me. Every detail of that day, his face, the room, the way the sun hit all of us, what I had for lunch that came up shortly after, even the game we were playing. Crash Bandicoot, which I hated with a seemingly irrational, seething passion after that. That horrifying experience actually saved my life. I never wanted my family to find me like that, or hear my mom scream like that, or see the look my friend gave him and me from my own little brothers. I'm 6 years sober this year, with a fiance, a house, a good job, fur babies, my very own PlayStation, with Crash Bandicoot, and my own baby boy on the way. Miss you, Nick. Hope the prick made it. I was harassed by a tortoise while on the toilet. In college, my friend and I wanted to go to a festival that happened to be just a few blocks away from my friend's parents' house, so they invited us to stay the night. My friend was into reptiles big time, and it turns out so were their parents. Almost every room in their house, except the kitchen, had a reptile enclosure in it. I had to use the restroom after the drive from campus, so they told me I could use the one on the first floor. It was an older house, and for whatever reason, the bathroom was huge. I set up shop, only to notice one wall is completely taken up by a massive enclosure for their boa constrictor, and a bright blue kiddie pool sat at the far end of the bathroom. I was peeking in the constrictor enclosure, trying to spot her, when the kiddie pool began to move towards me with a repeated thump thump thump. I was mid-deposit, staring at this encroaching pool with increasing concern as it kept getting closer and closer. With a final thump the pool was close enough I could see over the lip. Inside was a little grumpy tortoise. I watched it lean back a little, tuck its head in, then bash the side of the pool with its shell, scooting the whole thing forward an inch or so. He kept moving the pool until it was up against my foot. Then the tortoise just repeatedly bashed the side of the pool in rapid succession. When I got up to wash my hands, the tortoise changed directions to thump after me to the sink. When I got out and told my friend, they said, "Oh yeah, that's Ted. My parents probably haven't given him his salad and sun time yet and he's cranky." We then took Ted out in the yard, fed him some leafy greens and fruit, and had a great afternoon. I was with my teenage/childhood best friend at her fiance's family's home for the week. It was me, 18 at the time, my friend, 19, her fiancé, 25, his parents, 50s, his younger brother, 19, his sister, 30s, and the sister's son, 9. The first night I was there, I was using the bathroom. Just as I was standing up I heard a strange noise coming from a cabinet in there, and saw the 9-year-old boy with the cabinet door cracked open watching me use the bathroom. He had this creepy smile on his face. I was shocked for a moment, told him to get out. He did, not saying a word, just watching me with that same weird grin. Over the next 2 days he repeatedly found ways to catch me when I was indisposed, showering, changing, in the bathroom, anything along those lines. He did anything from peeking under doors to hiding in closets, to putting things indoors so they didn't fully lock, to stealing a compact mirror from his mom and slipping it under my freaking door. I had to start checking for him hiding in any room I was in, and if I had to use a bathroom in the house that didn't lock, had my friend stand guard. I immediately told my friend and her fiancé after the first incident. When the boy did it again, her fiancé was pee on my behalf and talked to his parents and his sister about it, but they didn't seem surprised or bothered by that information. They just shrugged it off, like it was a perfectly normal thing, and said they would try to keep an eye on him. They didn't. The last straw was on the second night I found him in my room next to my bed watching me sleep, and I knew fully well I'd locked my door. He never said a word, just watched me with that same fucking grin that honestly spooked me. I ended up sleeping on the floor in my friend and her fiancé's room that night. My friend told me that she found out the pervy little kid, or prevert, as we started calling him, had a track record of this with certain women. Apart from my friend, her fiancé and his younger brother, everyone else in the house just acted like it was normal. I ended up finding somewhere else to stay for night 3, then leaving the trip early. I couldn't take it. Couldn't take being around that him with that stare, having to constantly be on guard and my privacy invaded. That little kid still creeps me out when the memory comes to mind. Sleepover at my friend's. Family of 6, 2 adults and 4 kids, ran of toilet paper, and there were 7 to 11 and several other stores were mere blocks away, gas stations, McDonald's to steal from. They employed the family towel, poop stains and all, tacked to the wall. I held my pee all night until I nearly got a kidney infection the next morning. I called my dad to get me as early in the morning as I could. Edit, my highest ever voted comment, and it's about the Hill family poop towel crap. My dad would have been so proud. Met a nice couple at work, and they invited me and my fiancé at the time for dinner. The dinner was typical, but 2 more couples showed up as it ended, and they wanted us to stick around for other activities. Apparently they thought the way to convince us to join their swingers group was to sneak up on us with it. We politely declined. Went to a friend's house. We came in and somebody started yelling and swearing at him from another room. For no reason and impromptu. Scary, threatening and abusive sounding. It was his dad and the dad didn't realize I was there. The kid was cool about it, just kind of, maybe we should just go for a walk. It was how cool the kid was that unnerved me. Just his day to day. A long time ago I went to my weed dealer's apartment to get some weed. He was a tough guy, all tatted up, hung around some shady characters. I get there, and he has 2 kittens he just adopted. One of the kittens takes a liking to me, so I'm in a room with these hard as tough guys, and while we are passing this blunt around, I'm sitting in a lazy boy chair, and this cat is sitting on my chest, and kneading its paws into me and purring. It was the weirdest environment for this to be happening. When I was about 10, my cousins and I were sleeping at my grandma's house in Oklahoma. My uncle Rick came home drunk and got loud, so my grandma started yelling at him and hitting him with a rolled up magazine. My other uncle Cecil, who was only 4 years older than us, told us 3 kids to run out the back door and hide at the creek cause Rick's a mean drunk. It's about midnight, and we run down to the creek and stand around looking at each other for about 10 minutes, and then we walk back. We come in through the front door with muddy feet and leaves in our hair. Uncle Rick had already gone to bed. He wasn't mean at all. My grandma yells at us asking why we were outside. We say we were hiding at the creek. She says, "Who told you to hide at the creek?" We all point at Uncle Cecil, who was in the corner laughing. She starts chasing him around the table and beating him with the magazine. He was hiding his face, yelling ow ow ow, like he was in pain, but I could see he was still laughing. We all ran to the bedroom and jumped in bed and pulled the covers over our heads until it got quiet and we went to sleep. When I was a kid I went over to a friend's house. At some point they went to have dinner. They meaning the whole family. I wasn't at any point asked to join them. So while they ate I sat in the living room and played on their Atari. Stayed at my friend's house one time and found out her family only uses red light bulb in their house because an astrologer told them to do so. Not only the weirdest, but also not my proudest good friend of mine and I were just partying a lot and making bad decisions, drinking a lot, being very carefree about what we did and who we spent time with, a lot of things I don't care to get into. We drove 3 hours away to partake in our bad decisions. Friend blacks out in the car. I'm struggling to get him to wake up. I was really worried about him at that point. He just wasn't breathing very much and wasn't responding to being punched or slapped or anything. Eventually he does wake up, kind of confused. I notice he has a headlight out and it's dark and he's not good to drive, and I don't technically have a license. The risks seem to really outweigh the rewards of getting back home and crashing at his place. So we agreed that we should probably just get to the nearest hotel and book a room and go home in the morning. After being sobered up, we get to a gas station not even a mile away just to go in, grab some Gatorade or something, and start looking up hotels. This older woman we've never met walks up to our car and asks if we have a lighter. She's obviously been crying. We give her a lighter and ask if she's a local and if she knows where the closest hotel is cause we need to crash. She tells us she for sure could show us a hotel not far away cause her man just got mad at her and freaked out and went to this hotel for the night. We agreed. Then she suggested that we should save our money and we could crash at her place right behind the gas station. Our inhibitions are pretty low and my friend looks at me and says I'm not opposed to it, and at that point I only had $30 to my name, which wouldn't get us sit, and she seemed safe. So I figured alright, guess we are gonna check it out. She was a very sweet lady. I would never in a million years do that ever again. We get to her house and she's got the bed on the floor in the living room and keeps a cane or something against the door as that part of town is super dangerous and scares her without her boyfriend being there. She offers up the bed and takes the couch. She's really cool and pretty harmless, but definitely a heavy drinker. We were too, so whatever she gets drunk, we get pretty fucked up ourselves. She has a guitar that I played and she actually gave to me. She recorded me singing and even put it on her Facebook. We taught her how to add us, how to use her cell phone, because she didn't know how to use Messenger, and she had a lot of messages she'd never checked, one in particular from her high school sweetheart. So they started talking, and she was grateful for that. Not long into the night she is on the couch basically trying to seduce us. Lol, we told her we weren't really interested in all of that. Way too fucked up anyway for our plumbing to even work. Lol, we weren't offended at all. We really did not have the capacity to care or be creeped out, and we didn't want her to feel embarrassed. She ends up saying something like, if I touch myself don't y'all say sit, and she then just passed out immediately and didn't do anything. Lol. We left, agreed that it was a strange night, but our adventures to this city were not over for a while. Every other weekend for probably 3 months after, until my friend finally had the strength to treat his alcoholism in rehab, which inevitably led me to rethinking my life decisions too. She wasn't too handy with her phone, but we did go to visit her again every time that we went to that city and stayed the night again a few more times. Nothing weird ever happened again. She was lonely and always so thrilled to see us, and we would take her for car rides. She didn't have a car and listen to music. She eventually called us after we both cleaned up our acts and started trying to focus on work and not party, asking why she hadn't seen us in a couple months. Said she had went to a homeless shelter briefly but inevitably ended up with that guy that she reconnected with, and he had a nice place and they were doing well, and that we should come see her nice new place and stay. We really weren't in a position to go back. That was the last I ever heard from her. She never messaged back much on Facebook to begin with, but I have tried to reach out a few times and not got an answer. I just hope that she's alive and well. Very weird experience, but I think fondly of her. At someone's birthday party at her house, she divided us into groups and made us write songs about her. When I was in college there was this redneck named Scott who lived his mother and was desperate to leave and move in me. When I was helping him move, put his mom lit up a joint which I ignored. Then she tried to grope my crotch. Careful. Scott shouted, my mom is a pervert. Over the years, that is meme for me. Went to a friend's house when I was around 10 to play with a couple of other friends. Her younger brother forgot to shut the baby gate when we went to the basement. As soon as we were all in the basement, her baby brother fell down the stairs while he was in his walker. That's one of the scariest crap I've ever seen. Back then, I was sure that he had died, especially since it took a good 5 seconds before he started crying. When I was 8 I slept over at a friend's house. For dinner they had pancakes. Everyone ate together. After I put the syrup on my pancakes, I was scolded by the dad for using too much syrup. I then noticed everyone at the table only put a tablespoon on their pancakes. After I ate the pancakes, they took my plate and tried to pour the unused syrup back into the container. I remember when I was a kid, probably around 10 or so, we went to friends of our families for dinner. The husband and wife got into a very loud screaming match over whether to serve creamed corn or frozen corn. I'm talking in each other's faces and being shrilly loud. 10-year-old me was fascinated by how such a mundane object could arouse such passions, and of course I wanted to see how it turned out, but we were instead quickly ordered into the car and left. Still never understand how corn caused such a disagreement. I found out later they got divorced. This happened years ago. I was really into this girl and trying to get on her good side. I can't remember why, but we stopped by her house to get something. We walk in through the side door and I noticed that all the lights were off. This was unusual, since I thought I saw her dad's car in the driveway. I stare into the kitchen, and I see candles lit all romantic like. I grab her and say, "We gotta leave right now." She is annoyed and asks why. Just then, on cue, her dad's girlfriend lets out the loudest moan from upstairs. She grabs my arm and shudders in horror and we leave. I went to one of my best friend's girlfriend's house for some R&R. She was always a dominant person who humiliates this guy all the time. I never said anything, of course, but his family and other friends always did. Haha. He decides to break up with her suddenly the day I was there. 1. She cut his sub's tire. 2. Set fire on it using kerosene. 3. He tried to stop her and her dog bit his stomach. 4. I ran into the house to bring the fire extinguisher and her mom fought with me thinking something else was going on. 5. Managed to kick her dog away, put the fire out, and drive off with my friend, straight to the hospital, with one wheel, that with a badly cut tire, no air. Thinking of it, what the bloody hell is wrong with people? This one time I was at my ex-girlfriend's girlfriend during that time, and we weren't doing very well in the relationship. We were in the driveway talking, and we ended up sitting in her car while we talked about how the relationship wasn't the same as before, and how we weren't really feeling like it was going anywhere. The regular talk before a breakup. It was pretty tense and kinda sad. We noticed that the bathroom window was on, so we lowered our voices as we didn't want her family to hear us talking about breaking up. She was about to cry when we heard a massive, compressed fart echo through the confines of the porcelain toilet. The atmosphere changed entirely. We tried not to laugh, but it was impossible not to. Her mom called her with doubt as she asked her name. We rushed the hell out of the car and proceeded to laugh our butts off. That day, whatever her mom ate before laying the log saved our relationship. We didn't break up until a few months later. One time I went to a sleepover when I was 12 and the mom was there the whole time. I don't just mean in the house doing her own thing, I mean she had a sleeping bag out on the living room floor with all of us. Most awkward sleepover I've ever been to. Worst part is the girl didn't even think it was weird. Also we have to go to bed at 8 o'clock, so there's that. I met up with this guy to go for our first date. Ended up back at his house which he shared with his parents. No big deal, right? As soon as I stepped through the door, the smell of animal feces hits me like a brick. I held my breath and entered the lounge, where there was rubbish and boxes stacked as high as the ceiling. Even in this dude's room, there was boxes and rubbish. They had about 10 cats running around, 5 hamsters, pretty sure one of them was dead in the cage, 3 birds all cooped up in one small bird cage, 3 dogs and an iguana. I never saw him again after I made my excuses and left, blocked the dude's number, and blocked and deleted him from my socials. Drinking around a fire pit in friend's backyard. Dogs start barking at something on the other side of the fence. It's a skunk. Friend's husband is drunk and decides he really wants to kill the skunk. Everyone is trying to talk him out of it. Just leave the thing alone. Husband goes into the house, grabs a fag crossbow. Found out later that before he came back out of the house he had drunkenly misfired the crossbow into his own bedroom floor. Now this dude is drunk and holding a loaded crossbow, and about 5 people, including his wife, are standing between him and the skunk and the 3 dogs, now going crazy. pleading with him to settle down. Eventually we settle him down, and he acts like a grumpy inconsolable child for the rest of the night. Friend divorced him later that year, thank God. In college I drank way too much. One weekend a friend invited a group of us to go ice fishing and then stay the night at his parents' house. I became blackout drunk, and in the morning I woke up in his childhood bedroom, which still had old toys, silly wallpaper and rocket ship blankets. It was so surreal. I sat there for what felt like forever, terrified, desperately trying to remember where I was and how I got there. It's one of only a few times I've legitimately panicked. I went over to a place that a person I was dating lived. He and his roommate of 3 years had insisted on permanently keeping all the windows open and essentially allowing the house to become overgrown. They had multiple birds living in there. Also were random things written throughout the house in pen, Sharpie, crayon, as if whenever they had a thought they'd scribble it down. We got high as balls and watched Evil Dead. I got so tripped out during one scene I just left without explanation. They had a room furnished as a mini chapel dedicated to worshipping Satan, with a big upside cross and an altar and whatnot. In retrospect I wish I could have taken a photo. My best friend at the time and I, we were maybe 10F, were having a sleepover and went to the kitchen for some late night snacks. Her stepmom and stepmom's friend were topless and drunk inspecting each other's breasts, and they said, oh, it's just what women do when they get older. I was so scared and didn't know what to do, so I called my mom to come pick me up lol. My high school friend's parents had an interesting relationship dynamic. His mother had to call the father sir and kneel in front of him when bringing him food or drink. When I asked my friend about it, he simply said it's cultural and left it at that. I've always wondered if it's a dom/sub thing, and it kind of disturbs me that they would expose their children to that. When I was 14 I went to a friend's house for a birthday party sleepover. There was 5 other girls invited. After dinner we got settled in the lounge room to watch horror movies. Her parents came in and sat on the couch, took out 2 huge bongs and got stoned. They started commentating the movie as we watched it, like it was a live sports event. This was the first time all us girls had seen drugs or been around someone on drugs. So weird. Birthday girl was so embarrassed. We never went back to her house for a sleepover after that one. We went to a foreign classmate's house to do our film class project. He said that, since we are making a horror film, we could try filming in the dark storage space above the dining room. So indeed he climbed up there to get some establishing shots, but as soon as he crawled in, we found out the ceiling wasn't made of concrete and he ended up breaking the ceiling and falling down. Luckily he wasn't hurt, but now there's a big human-sized hole in the ceiling. Needless to say his parents were not impressed, and we had to change our filming location to my aunt's condo. In college, I went to this girl's house during a free period with 6 or 7 friends. We arrive, and she opens the door, says hello to her father, and immediately strips down to her bra and panties in the living room. We spent 45 minutes hanging out with her and her dad, and the whole time she's walking around in basically nothing. I asked her dad about it at a different time, and he nonchalantly says she's always done this, and acted like it was a completely normal thing to do. Also, bonus points for her goth friend who sat there playing with a knife the whole time. Me and a bunch of work dudes had a younger guy we worked with, so we went to his 4 birthday drinks, which was cool, but all his friends were still 17 years old or so, while we were mid-20s. What was meant to be a quiet night for me escalated quickly. Despite having the intention to drive home after 2 beers, I got that drunk that another mate of mine took me back to his house to crash. Good lad. We get back to his, and because his sister wasn't home that night he put me to rest in her bed, all nice and pink and frilly and whatnot. A couple of hours later, I wake up with the most immense need to pee in my life. So I get out of this pink bed and waltz into the hallway. I have never been in this house before, so don't have a clue where anything is. Mind you, I've been told his parents are asleep next to the room I'm in. I do my best, half stumbling half naked, and falling over everywhere, trying to find a toilet. At this point, it felt like I had a knife in the end of my schlong, because of how hard I was holding back this pee. Finally, I see what must be the toilet room at the end of another hallway. only to find that the door is locked. There's no one in there. The toilet is simply locked. I go back and forward through this whole house twice, dying in need of a pee. Every room is locked, and no lights are turning on. So here I am, trying to be quiet, in what I'm starting to assume is a house I may not meant to be in. I think fuck it, I'm pee in the yard. Except all the doors and windows to get outside are locked from the key barrel, and all the keys have been removed. I can't even pee outside. I thought I'll not be disrespectful and pee in the kitchen sink, in case someone comes out. So I go back into the sisters' supposed room in the hope I can MacGyver my way to bladder release. And I see it. An empty soft drink bottle. Whoosh. This pee comes out that hard I nearly drop the bottle. I nearly fill this FKN thing to the brim. Of course, I didn't care. There was a small possibility some splashback occurred. I can't recall. I was lucky enough to even still be standing upright. Eventually, my bladder is empty. My bottle is full. I replace the cap and call it a night. I wake up to a grown man I've never seen before staring at me with the door wide open. Me, still pee, unknown to this guy, in what I assume was his daughter's bed. We make prolonged eye contact, and he then continues down the hallway. I hear him say something along the lines I have no idea who that guy is as they continue down the hall. He was followed by 2 or 3 tradesmen behind him. I start thinking, what the fuck have I gotten into? I stand up, get my pants on. Also not a good look coming out of someone's daughter's room, and as my pants are buckling, a girl appears to not be overly pleased at me exiting what I assumed was her bed. I say sorry, grab my pee bottle, the color within made it obvious it was pee, and walk out. And here's my mate simply having breakfast in the dining area. After some bacon and a laugh, I find out the house is undergoing extensive renovations. The toilets in that part of the house are buggered, so they are kept locked, and the power was disconnected too. It wasn't until after we all ate and laughed that I realized I should take my pee bottle out from under the dining table to the outside bin. All in all, good memory. Met a girl on Reddit. Talked for a few months and discovered that we live 2 hours apart. As one does, I decided to go visit her for a weekend. Her dad was the strangest part of the visit. He didn't greet me when he came home. At one point, he was standing frozen in the kitchen, just staring at the wall. When the girl and I were cuddling on the living room couch, I looked back and saw him standing in the dark hallway, watching us. During dinner, her and her parents ate off of dirty plates. The food was good, but the family dynamics were odd. It didn't feel like a real family. They had a lot of money, but I had no idea what her parents did. They didn't talk to each other like a family. But it wasn't just her family that was off. It was her too. Every time she went to the bathroom, she was in there for at least half an hour with no explanation. I gave her a gift and she didn't say thank you. She walked way too fast, and it was hard to keep up. After the visit, she asked me if her parents seemed off. I said yes, and she said something like, so it isn't just me. I still have so many questions, but no answers. And we stopped talking maybe a month or so after that visit, so I guess I'll never know. Went to a friend's early Saturday in middle school, possibly 9th grade. Went grocery shopping with her, her sister and mom. Well, we get back, and I had a bunch of bags of groceries waiting in the garage by the door. My friend said to just go in. I didn't want to because her dad was home, and I didn't meet him yet. My friend insisted it was fine. I went in from the garage door, and when I looked in directly to the right in the kitchen, her dad was cooking something on the stove. In only his tighty whities. I don't remember which expletive he yelled, but I immediately went back out the way I came. I can only imagine the face I was making. Somehow, my friend convinced me to still stay the night. I was deeply embarrassed and avoided her father. Lol, I felt like such a bad guest. I always knock, and I was mostly mad at her for telling me to go in. Hilarious now though. Grew up in a black neighborhood, hadn't hung around white kids at their houses till high school. Was at a student council meeting at my friend Jake's house, and he asks me if I want a soft drink. I reply sure, and then he turns and asks his mom for one. She says they are out, and he goes, what the hell mom? This is crap. She then apologizes and leaves to get us some. He's still pissed and cursing. I had no car and all I kept thinking was I wanna go home. That would never happened in my house. I'm almost 40 and still afraid to slip up and curse in front of my parents. At a buddy's grandparents' homestead, after they had passed, I was sleeping soundly when I got woken up by what sounded like snowballs being thrown at the side of the house. Figured it was animals. Went back to sleep. Next morning the buddy whom I was with asked me if I heard the cupboard doors slamming shut in the kitchen. Last time I stayed there. As a child, I had a paralyzing fear of dogs. Can't count the number of times I was at someone's house and they promised to keep their dog away, then let the dog out later because they're friendly. Softened my opinion on dogs over the years, but never will trust that type of dog owner. Went to a girl's house, second time we were hanging out. We were getting a little frisky, but she decided she didn't wanna have sex yet. Perfectly fine. We go meet her friends and get some food, go back to her place and start drinking. One of her friends wants to go buy weed so we hop in the car. Girl I'm seeing had to pee, so they pull over and she pees on her neighbor's sidewalk. I cash one. We get back to her house, start smoking and she starts screaming outside and being extra rowdy, making bird noises and staring at me and being confrontational asking me if I'm having fun. Then she's like cover your ears and rips the loudest wettest fart. She laughs, then farts again. I cash too. She is visibly upset at the fact that I'm getting a little turned off by her. Goes inside all pouty. I go in to comfort her and act like everything is fine and normal. Her friends come inside and we are drinking more. She pulls me upstairs, stumbling. Wants to have sex now, but can't consent because she's wasted. Says she feels sick. I'm like this isn't happening. I think I'm gonna go home. She starts acting like a child and making me feel extremely uncomfortable, begging me to stay in front of her friends and blaming me for thinking she's too weird or something. I cash 3. I finally leave and she blows up my phone gaslighting me saying that I can't handle her weirdness. I'm like you peed on your neighbor's sidewalk, farted like 3 times, and were being a sloppy drunk and making me uncomfortable. Sorry but you're not what I'm looking for. That was that. We were playing hide and seek and we found a pole for dancing in her parents' room. I found out my dad's girlfriend doesn't close the door when she showers. Clogged toilet my first time there. A buddy and I were walking down the street and noticed a drunk guy bothering a woman outside a store and his balls were hanging out of his shorts. We stopped to help. And so does some guy in an army jacket, and after the cops come by to deal with the drink guy, army guy invites us over to have a beer. We were about 14 or so at the time. We said sure. Get to his apartment, and he gives us a beer each, and shows us his big knife. Tells us how to gouge out eyes, and how to shoot someone under the chin at the throat pointing up so, if by chance they survive, they will be paralyzed. Then proceeds to demonstrate on me a choke move he was taught. Which fucking hurt. My friend had the knife in hand just in case army guy didn't let go. After I was let go and able to breath we pieced out of there fast. The longer we sat there, the more scared I was getting. Haven't thought about that for some time. Went to a friend's house. We came in and somebody started yelling and swearing at him from another room. For no reason and impromptu. Scary, threatening and abusive sounding. It was his dad and the dad didn't realize I was there. The kid was cool about it, just kind of, maybe we should just go for a walk. It was how cool the kid was that unnerved me. Just his day to day. I found a hardcore porn magazine under my friend's mattress, top bed on a bunk bed, so it was about at eye level, must have been sticking out a bit, because something caught my attention. We were 10 years old maybe. She just blew it off, like it was nothing. A year later my mom banned me from sleeping over at my friend's house. She was still welcome at our house. I was secretly relieved, because the vibe was weird over there for a million reasons. When I was an adult, my mom finally told me that the reason for the ban was because teachers suspected sexual abuse. My mom taught at our school. I'm sure it got reported to CPS but nothing came of it. Anyway, pretty sure the magazine I found that day was their version of bedtime stories. As a 12 years old we shifted to a small town from our cattle property so we kids Could go to high school. I didn't know anyone at school till the weird kid befriended me, invited me home after school one day. There's me thinking great, I'm making friends. When we got there her mom was obviously slightly drunk, no father around that I could see, just sitting in her room talking crap when her mom calls us into her bedroom. So we went in and her mum is lying on a single bed, and there's a double in there that we both sort of lounged on. Then her mum starts crying. The girl tells me her dad died about 6 months ago. Him going, so sorry to hear that. Her mum starts telling me how he was a bad alcoholic and they'd gone to bed one night. He was back quote spooning her when he died in his sleep with his arms wrapped around the mum, cause she was drunk till she didn't wake up till quite late and his body had started rigor mortis. She realizes and starts screaming. Daughter runs in. Dad is dead and mum is stuck in his arms. Had to call police to help apparently. She couldn't get out. Best bit though was I was sitting on the bed where he died 6 mths previous, but they'd never changed the sheets or covers. They smelled musty. No wonder the girl acted weird. They both really needed therapy, but this was nearly 50 years ago. One time I went to a sleepover when I was 12 and the mom was there the whole time. I don't just mean in the house doing her own thing. I mean she had a sleeping bag out on the living room floor with all of us. Most awkward sleepover I've ever been to. Worst part is the girl didn't even think it was weird. Also we have to go to bed at 8 o'clock, so there's that. Went to a friend's house when I was around 10-year-old to play with a couple of other friends. Her younger brother forgot to shut the baby gate when we went to the basement. As soon as we were all in the basement, her baby brother fell down the stairs while he was in his walker. That's one of the scariest shit I've ever seen. Back then, I was sure that he had died, especially since it took a good 5 seconds before he started crying. Oh no, you just woke up a very fuck up memory. When I was in high school, we got a new student, a girl who got transferred because of bad behavior. I was an outcast, she was an outcast, so we befriended each other. Although our social status was the only thing we had in common, I realized very quickly that she was a pathological liar. From the very first day, she had been telling other students that she had missed her period. After a month of crying wolf, we started ignoring her false pregnancy drama. I'm picking this example as it's relevant to the story, but there was a myriad of other instances where we caught her in a lie. One day she claimed she was doing coke with the elite every weekend. The next day she had never even tried weed. It's a bit challenging to develop a friendship with someone whom you cannot trust at all, not even when they are telling you about oatmeal they had for breakfast. So, after half a semester of pregnancy scares, she actually got pregnant. Her boyfriend was an alleged abuser. She weaved too many stories about him. He was sterile, so he beat her up. Because the baby wasn't his, they were breaking up twice a week. There were 2 other possible baby daddies, and one of them was twice her age. It was a headache listening to all of this. One day my friend and her boyfriend invited me over for dinner. She was very pregnant, and it turned out the kid was his. Whatever. We were eating and talking about random things when the boyfriend nonchalantly said he was going to fuck the baby after it's born. My friend took it pretty lightly and made a joke out of it. I was in complete shock and wanted to disappear. We stopped being friends shortly after high school. I had an acquaintance in high school that lived down the street from me. Her dad was an invalid and lived in a hospital bed in the middle of their front room/living room on a breathing machine. One day she invited some people over. We dropped acid and she fucked her boyfriend on the couch in front of her dad and all of us, and someone else played drums aggressively in the corner. That was a wild trip. I think about it sometimes. I was waiting with my friend for my other friend to get ready. They're neighbors, and she offered to wait in the house. So we just went inside when her stepdad and mom come home, and her stepdad corners me and starts screaming, "Why am I in his house?" I did not know it wasn't okay, and I said I'll just go then, and he said no, you're not allowed to leave, and started yelling at my friend. I just walked out the door and my friend apologized and we all just went home. This isn't the worst, and it's not my weirdest, but I was hitchhiking in upstate New York. When I was in my early 20s, some nice people offered to take me home and give me a ride to Syracuse in the morning. When I got to the house, the first thing anyone said to me was, "I take it's been a while since you've been able to shave. Same dude tried explaining to me that I was hitchhiking because I was sad, and that I was sad because I hadn't had enough sex. I played dumb and let him talk in circles. There were 10 to 15 adults and children living there, and 2 different dogs had just had litters. I took a shower and was scooping puppies out of the tub the whole time. When it was time to pass out, someone took me upstairs to sleep in a spare room. While we were walking up the stairs, he handed a bottle of Febreze over his shoulder and said, "You're gonna want this. There's some kinda dead animal trapped in the wall, and we haven't been able to find it, but we can smell it. One of the cats is missing." So, highlight of the whole fiasco was a Home Depot shopping cart in the kitchen that was overflowing with Mountain Dew cans with a chainsaw sticking blade up in the middle of it. They told me to come back and work apple harvest with them, and I never did. 10/10ths would go back though. Shortly after high school, almost 20 years ago, I was hanging out with a buddy who hung out with hang around prospects and such. Not members but aspiring members. We went to another friend of his place, chilling in the backyard, and this dude comes in distraught and kind of freaking out. He'd hurt someone really bad the night before, probably killed them. Hadn't slept all night, and it was eating at him. Not going to say what, but he was getting into details. It was pretty fuck up. About 3/4 of the way through he sees me and realizes someone he didn't know is there. It was damn near 40°C out, but now it's cold. Atmosphere completely changed. Marches over to me, demands I take my sunglasses off, and starts grilling me. After what felt like forever, he eventually offers me a beer. I decline because I didn't like beer at the time, especially warm Black Label Supreme. He informs me it's actually my favorite. Drunk up. I guess I like warm beer today. Spent the next 5 hours running around town and getting high with them, figuring out how to extract myself from that group of people without raising suspicion. I went to a sleepover once when I was 8/9, and they fed me a mayonnaise sandwich. It was literally bread with just a wad of mayonnaise inside, and the other kids got McDonald's. They also kept insulting my parents, telling me how poor I was, and kept implying that my parents were on drugs. I ended up getting so mad at the dad I stood up on a chair and screamed he was fat and ugly and walked home. The next day they showed up at my door yelling, claiming I stole the dad's ID, and told all the parents from the sleepover not to invite me to their house because I was a thief, and never apologized after they found it. I later found out they had a feud before I went there because the wife tried to sleep with my dad when we first moved in, but my parents didn't want that to get in the way of mine and their daughter's friendship because we got so close. I've been waiting for this one. So I was in like 7th grade. I went to my friend's house for the first time with my other friend. We had been playing Sexual Truth or Dare, like I assume most people have done. We were hanging out in her room, and she said she wants to play a game. We have to ask each other a question, and whoever gets the answer wrong has to take their clothes off. So we are playing this game. Eventually we are all naked sitting in a circle on her bed. Then she goes to her dresser and says she has a vibrator and dares one of us to use it until we are done. We all try it, but chicken out pretty fast. Then we hear her dad call from downstairs. We all freak and get dressed really fast. She goes downstairs and comes back up and says I have to leave and that her dad said I'm not allowed at her house anymore. LMAO. Like it wasn't even my idea, but okay. So humiliating, I never did go back lol. Late to the party, but when I was at uni I used to do a bit of jing. I got booked to play a warm-up set at a club in a neighboring city, but didn't have a car. I was only getting paid £40 for the set, and didn't want to spend my whole fee getting home. A taxi would have cost around that much, and there were no buses or trains running at that time. After the set, I made it my mission to find somewhere to crash for free. I was also a pretty big stoner at the time, and was keen to score some weed. Anyway, I got talking to this random dude in the smoking area of the club, and he was super friendly. He not only offered to sell me some weed, his housemate was a dealer, but also said I could stay the night on his couch. It was literally the ideal outcome for me. So, we headed back to his house, smoked up, and he went to bed. I crawled into my sleeping bag, which I had brought with me, just in case, and passed out. At around 5:30 am, I was woken up by the sound of some people entering the room. I'm still in a bit of a sleepy haze, but very clearly hear someone shout, "What the fuck?" Before I know what's happening, I'm being yanked up off the sofa, still trapped in my sleeping bag. I'm suddenly nose to nose with this incredibly coked up, aggressive dude, who is demanding to know who the fuck I am, and why I'm asleep on their sofa. Turns out the guy was another housemate who thought I was homeless, and had broken into their house to sleep. Cocaine logic, I guess. I hastily explained the situation, and we realized he'd just come from the same club that I had been binging at, and had actually enjoyed my set. The guy let me go, and we sat down, and shared a couple of incredibly tense joints whilst I waited for the first bus back to my town. I'm pretty sure that's the closest I ever came to being stomped out by a stranger. When I was 23ish, I decided to reconnect with an old friend from middle school. He had gotten married, had a 1-year-old kid, and lived not too far from me. So he invited me over one night to catch up and have a beer. I get over to his place and there are a few other people there I didn't know. 2 guys, who were his friends, and some girl, who was a friend of his wife. Everything is going fine for a while, until everyone starts randomly doing Molly on a Wednesday night, except for me and my friend's wife, while the baby is just right there chillin' in the playpen. A while later the girl, wife's friend, starts freaking out. She's making no sense, and threatening to stab my friend and the baby, yelling at the top of her lungs. I don't know if this was PTSD, a psychotic break, or what, but it was fucking scary. My friend eventually managed to physically push her out the front door and yells, "Get the fuck out of our house." Not even 10 seconds later, and the glass window next to the front door shatters, and I see her bloody leg blasting through it. The girl is kicking, punching, and screaming while broken glass is flying everywhere. This is when my friend's wife grabs the baby, calls the cops and heads out the back door. The cops eventually get there, put her in handcuffs, and she goes to jail. Hell of a reunion, and was probably the last time I saw that middle school friend. I'm not gonna say worst, but it was definitely the weirdest, and looking back the funniest. It's 10 PM on a Friday and we are hanging out in my buddy's room watching The Interview, that North Korea comedy. We are cracking up at one of the scenes. A few minutes later his mom's boyfriend comes down and knocks on the wall, peeks his head around the corner, and says that his mom wants us to be more quiet. Dude was mad awkward, plus my buddy didn't like him. Few minutes later, we were laughing again, and his mom came down. She says quiet down, and he goes into a tirade about how, if he wasn't there she wouldn't care, and how this house isn't a library on a Friday unless he's there. She laughs and tells him to shut up. Right before she's about to walk out, he goes, "Hey mom, you wouldn't even be down here if he was fucking you hard enough. Your pelvis would hurt too much to get down the steps." I pulled my hoodie up over my head and sunk into the couch and laughed myself into tears. I didn't even know him for that long at the time, but came to learn him and his mom have a crazy relationship. They've been through a ton together, and the communication lines are apparently wide open. This was 15 years ago, and they are still super close. I had to have been 16 at the time, but a friend of mine made friends with some Ukrainian immigrants. They were renting out an apartment in the complex that my friend lived. They must have been in their 20s. One night we were at their apartment drinking and playing cards. I had access to the Bluetooth and was playing music. After a few songs, Du Hast by Rammstein begins playing, and a few moments later one of the Ukrainians pulls out a revolver type pistol and lays it on the table while asking me, "What the fuck do you know about Rammstein?" I quickly tried to say I just love rock music, all the while I can hear and feel the adrenaline literally pumping through my veins. After some drunken Slavic words, I pulled an Irish exit. I never saw them again. Shortly after this, my friend had informed me that their visas expired and they were deported back to the Ukraine. I was at a house party of a girl who, at one point, asked me out on a date. I declined at the time, despite actually liking her, because I was going through so much family stuff at home I couldn't handle anything else, and she knew that. Anyway, there I am, having a few drinks, eventually deep in my cups, where you don't taste much anymore. She hands me a drink, tastes kinda funny. 5 minutes later, projectile vomiting, dizziness, stomach pain, ambulance called, stomach pumped. Turns out she didn't take rejection well. I found out after the fact that she filled half the cup with extra strength dishwashing liquid and multiple witnesses verified this. A week later I asked her why she did it. I don't know what you're talking about. Denied it until the last time I saw her on the last day of high school. Not so much dodged a bullet but drank it, I guess. I lived in the scrubby Palmetto Pine Woods in North Florida and was an only child. I was alone all the time and spent whole days just wandering in the woods. This was the 70s. There were no other kids to play with. Finally, when I was about 8, a girl my age moved about a mile away down the limestone road. She was deaf and couldn't talk, though, so, although I hung out with her, she didn't make me feel any less lonely. She was very poor and lived in an unpainted cinder block house that was up off the ground on other cinder blocks. Their house always smelled like old grease, pee, and Love's Baby Soft, which is what disappointment smells like to me. There was no sheetrock or anything on the walls, just cardboard, and I remember thinking the family was completely depraved because they'd write messages to each other right on the wall, and nice families like mine, who had a separate formal living room with the good furniture that never got used, didn't do that kind of thing. At the time I didn't know that my dad had traded a whole bunch of marijuana and cocaine for our house. So, the thing I remember best about my friend's house was sitting next to her huge mom on this sagging couch, watching Elvis in Blue Hawaii on the TV. The mom was on oxygen, and she had a big old tank sitting right next to her while she sat there and chain smoked. No one acted alarmed by this, so I thought it was normal. The really odd thing about all of this was that a few lots down that same limestone road my friend lived on was the Forks Tudor mansion of one of the Van Zandt brothers, Ronnie, Johnny, Donnie, Bonnie, Shawnee, don't know, from the band Lynyrd Skynyrd. I think growing up here led to a lifelong interest in class and status signifiers, and the difference between having money vs actual wealth. It was a weird place, for sure. When I was in middle school, I was the assigned buddy for a new girl at the school. We had struck up a friendship, and I spent the day hanging out with her, another friend, her older brother, and mom at an amusement park. It was supposed to be a sleepover. The brother gave off consistently weird, aggressive vibes, but I ignored them because I didn't want to hurt the girl's feelings. The other friend was smarter than me, and, when we left the amusement park, went home instead of spending the night. That night, her brother chased us around with a butcher knife, and we had to barricade ourselves in her bedroom while her mother debated calling the police. She didn't, so we stayed locked in her room all night, starving. He banged on the door for a while before eventually passing out. Apparently this was a fairly common occurrence, and he was supposed to be on some type of medication that he was currently off of. She even had an escape route out of that room for when she felt like he may bust in. Sadly, we didn't continue that friendship. I think about her a lot, and I hope she's safe somewhere. I was at my friend's house. He really likes pranking his half-brother. They were 4 that lived in the house, my friend, his mom, his half-brother, same mother, and their stepfather. He had no children of his own. When this happened I, 20 meters, was just picking up my friend, 25 male, but before we left he just had to pour ice cold water on his half-brother's face and wake him up. But you see, my friend usually always goes too far, so he filled a bucket of ice cold water and asked me to go downstairs. His brother's bedroom was in the basement, and opened the door for him. When we were outside his door we could hear him moan. That made my friend giddy, and said he was most likely having one of his special dreams, and told me to open the door slowly. I did. I wish I didn't. Inside the room we saw his stepfather, around 55, and his half-brother, 19, having full-on sex. Like the stepfather was thrusting at the speed of fucking light, and so fucking sweaty. I can't get this image out of my head. As a child a friend invited me over to see her cat's kittens. I rode my bike, and it was the first time my mom let me cross a major road on my own. I get to her house. We are happily playing with the kittens when her dad walks in. He's only wearing tighty whities that were not at all white. He smelled terrible and carried an acoustic guitar. He yelled at us to turn off the TV because he wrote a new song he wanted to play and we had to dance. My friend and her sister seemed like this was normal, so I sat there for about 5 minutes listening to him, watching them dance, then said I had to go. He got irritated and said if I wanted to feel the music I could snort his Kool-Aid powder, which he demonstrated, and I assume now was cocaine and grape Kool-Aid powder mixed. I had seen enough after school specials. I bolted. I ran out the door. Couldn't get my bike unlocked, so just left it and ran home sobbing. Told my mom a weird naked man was singing to me and wanted me to snort Kool-Aid. Wasn't allowed over there ever again. My dad went, got my bike after he got off work, and had words with my friend's dad. I was around 9 or 10 when I went to a friend's house for a birthday party. She was walking a few of us around the house showing us stuff because her parents were artists and she had a lot of cool stuff. Around every corner or so, down the stairs or hall, around a column, in the bathroom, etc. there was a small black/white hand-drawn picture of a nude woman. No one said anything, but we gave each other looks. It was just slightly weird until we got to the basement. It was a rectangular room with probably hundreds of paintings and drawings of a nude woman in various poses. They ranged in size from 4x6 to huge. Some black/white and some in color. Lots of detail. The room had no furniture except for 3 to 4 of those big lights they use in films. Google shows me it's called a soft box light, and a red couch with a blanket draped over it. We just stared in silence until someone asks what's going on, and she goes, "Oh, it's just my mom. My dad likes to draw her." My mom wouldn't let me go over anymore after I told her about the naked drawings. It took me a few years to realize they were producing videos down there